Welcome to the Intercut podcast channel, the weekly place for the latest on movies, TV, and entertainment that people can't cut away from. I'm your co-host, Zachary Shevich, and joining me, he's brought you a gift from the church. It's Arturo Zurita.
It came from a friend of a friend.
I mean, you won it. It's a prize. You should display it. I don't know if I would display one of those dolls in my home, even if somebody gave it to me for free.
I wouldn't let one of those dolls in my home. Period.
We are here to discuss all things horror in 2024, so we had to bring on one of our favorite horror aficionados. You can call him Mr. Downstairs. We like to call him Drum Dums or Lee. Shout out to Lee for joining us for the first time in many years on this channel. Hopefully you go back with us to the last time we brought Lee on to the Intercut podcast, but we're really glad to be joined once again. Lee, how's it going? How's 2024 in horror been for you?
It's been good. I actually live in hell because at least this is hot as hell. So I'm definitely the perfect choice.
Yeah. Exactly. I do not envy having to deal with the heat in Florida right now. But yeah, as I mentioned, we wanted to bring Lee on because we're in the middle of what feels like a particularly strong run for the horror genre midway through 2024. This past weekend, A Quiet Place Day 1 became the 8th highest grossing movie of the year, while Longlegs opened above $20 million, becoming distributor Neon's most lucrative opening weekend ever. That movie surpassed 2024's Immaculate, which had previously set the record for Neon. And on the other end of the spectrum, Late Night for the Devil also achieved a similar feat for IFC Films earlier this year. Beyond those four films breaking dollars at the box office, you scroll through the top 40 highest grossing movies of the year so far, and you see titles like The Strangers Chapter 1, Night Swim, Imaginary, Abigail, The First Omen, Maxine. The indie horror scene has featured some strong films as well, with stuff like In a Violent Nature, Stopmotion, Arcadian, Art I know has a much longer list than this one that we'll get to. And that's not to mention the films that 2024 still has yet to bring us, like Alien Romulus, Smile 2, Afraid, The Front Room, Heretic, and Nosferatu. Horror never dies, but in 2024 it may feel more alive than ever. Lee, you're immersed in these movies, so I wanted to ask you, do you feel like this is an especially good time to be a fan of horror movies? And if so, what do you feel like has contributed to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think this year is, I feel like I say this every year, but I think this year especially because we've had a lot of variety. Plus you also have studios like Neon, A24, and they're just constantly pushing the envelope in terms of original content as well as just interesting ideas in terms of like the stories that they're trying to tell, novelty type ideas with Late Night with the Devil, so it feels like there's just something new every week, and they just keep surprising me. You know, it's not like, I know back in the 80s you had, it was like the land of slashers and I'm a slasher fan, but even I still remember back in the 80s, even I was like, okay, now the well's starting to run dry. But if anybody that says that horror is dead is completely off the rocker, and they're just stuck in the past, because I mean, there's just this year alone, there's just so much great stuff. And even the bigger studio type fare, like, Quiet Place Day 1. That's a quality film, even though, it's a major studio type film. But so I think there's just a lot of variety in terms of production, in terms of story, in terms of characters, everything across the board. So yeah, it's a great year for horror.
Art, and I know you were trying to define like all the little subgenres of horror that we've gotten earlier so far this year.
I mean, just going off of what Lee said, when you take what the big franchises are supposed to be, like A Quiet Place, that was the original movie. Like, the franchises now are the original movies we just got 5 years ago on their third installment.
Yeah.
And again, Lee would know even more about this, that when you have those big slasher films, the Friday the 13th that's supposed to be going to A24 kind of got lost, right? Halloween went to Blumhouse, and now they're trying to go another route with it. They just brought back The Exorcist, just to restart The Exorcist. So it's almost like all of the old franchises, they have so much baggage with it that even though they want to like bring those back up, there may be like a whole horror community talk there about like, actually it's easier to just start from scratch and get another franchise going than it is to piss off the fans for something that has, it's been here for too long. And I think that's what's caused this fascinating shift in horror, even if you want to call it a shift, because I agree with Lee, right? Every new movie that comes out, finally, horror is back. How many times can you say that before you have to admit it never went away to begin with? I just think we're just in this new mode of it with streaming, with the ability to be able to get more stuff funded. And just people, I feel like they're more accepting of a lot of these ideas. You find filmmakers going the horror route to be able to tell a story they may not be able to say in a drama or a comedy.
You mentioned like streaming. There are other titles like Lowlifes is a title that I just heard about on Tubi a couple months ago that nobody was really talking about. So there's so many options. And thinking about, Friday the 13th and Halloween, A24, Miramax picking them up. Maybe part of the reason those don't really get quite the push that you would think they'd get is because these, like A24, they have so much back catalog and different options to choose from. They don't really need these big franchises. Like Art was saying, you can pretty much like Terrifier. That was just a few years ago, and now it's starting to blow up. Everybody, especially in the horror community, we can't get enough of it, and we're looking forward to Terrifier 3 at the end of the year. That's a pretty new franchise, and I think there's more to come with other franchises.
Agreed.
Definitely. And it's that sort of like coming at you from all angles aspect to it that I think is one of the things that has made the proliferation of horror movies really exciting, right? You have these bigger studio horror movies coming from the Blumhouse, to collaboration with, I think, Warner Brothers, and you have your occasional like A24 horror movies that can get pretty big, or even Neon ones. And then further down the line, you have your IFC ones, or your ones that go straight to Shudder. And there's like a lot of different avenues for horror movies to take, and there's lots of different paths that filmmakers are choosing to go down in order to fill those paths. But it's also the fact that horror has traditionally been one of these genres that is producible on somewhat limited budgets, and it's an avenue for talented filmmakers to really see how they can push themselves and push the limits of film within the confines of whatever budget they're able to put together, or whatever studios are willing to give them. And as we've sort of seen Hollywood move in two directions, where you have these huge blockbusters that never cost less than $100 million anymore, or these more smaller bets that are like maybe $10 million or less, maybe even $1 million or less, it's been, I think, a lot of filmmakers have chosen to prove themselves through the horror genre. So you get these people like the Philippou brothers who emerge with Talk to Me, or you get Jennifer Kent who emerged in Babadook, and David Robert Mitchell for It Follows. And now these are the filmmakers we really get excited about. You see somebody like Ari Aster, who made his name through Hereditary and Midsommar, and now is moving on to things that maybe still are classified as horror, but are even beyond the horror genre as well. So it's just this really fertile proving ground that if you are a filmmaker with a vision, it's one of the genres that you can somewhat reliably get made, and there's lots of places to produce it and lots of ways to watch it now.
Yeah, one thing about horror that's so interesting is that it's this genre that it's so easy to get your start. Just because it's so inexpensive, and you can trace it back. I'm going back to like the 70s, like Spielberg. A lot of big directors, I think they got their start in horror just because budget-wise it was easier to get a movie made, and then they were able to bounce from that to bigger action type fare. But then you have other directors that's just what they love doing, like Carpenter and Wes Craven. Wes Craven even tried to get out of horror, but he always found himself coming back to it. So I think it's one, it's not really a paradigm shift. You can look back, as far as 50, 60 years, and horror has always seemed to like be the start of getting a filmmaker going in his career, being able to prove himself. And then these producers, they'll see, oh yeah, this guy, he was able to, I'm thinking now, I just reviewed Oddity, and that looks like a very lower budget type of film, but big fan too, man. And I was just highly impressed with Damien MacArthur, I think that's his name.
Yeah, he did Caveat before, and
he did Caveat before this,
because of Shudder.
Very talented.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Yeah, man, it runs the gamut. It's pretty much your life. It's my life as far like you can trace it back to when you were born, and there was a horror movie like me. I was born in '73, and The Exorcist was just massive, and it feels like horror will never die. You know, I think it saves Hollywood over and over.
Not only that, but it's also like one of the very few genres that speaks to itself. I feel like that's one where it has an unspoken thing that the audience is able to bring to every horror, something that they don't really do with most action films unless it's in that genre. You know, if it's an MCU film or a raid film or something there. But horror, in a sense, is always speaking to itself, and people know the cliches, people know the lore that comes with it, and you're able to expand from that. One of the subcategories that I thought of was the idea of adaptations, where instead of it being Dracula, Demeter, whatever it is, it's Abigail. A different take into that story of what it would be through what his daughter is. Lisa Frankenstein. Like, I don't even, like, where does that inspiration come from if not from the daughter of Robin Williams trying to do something different? We know Winnie the Pooh's getting adapted. It's something, right? Stuff like Watchers and Tarot, they're based off of real things out there that are now becoming IP, right? They're taking Irish
Nepo
folklore. Another perfect way to put it.
We call it Nepo horror, Brandon Cronenberg and his sister, you know.
They shout out Brandon. I don't know how you feel about Brandon. I think Possessor was one of the most interesting movies to come out.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I just want to make sure. I have not been able to see
Humane.
His sister's. Yeah, what was that one?
Which I was a little more mixed on. I don't know if Lee caught that one either.
No, I haven't seen that one yet. It's definitely on my radar. But Possessor, I absolutely adored. A funny story, quick, about Possessors. I saw that. I had to drive like an hour away, but I really it was like one of the top of my list. I really wanted to see it, and I got there, and the theater owner literally ran up to me. I got me and my wife, and he was trying to get me to not watch Possessor. He was like, this is not for everybody. This is going to be very disturbing. And I think there's plenty of other choices here that I think you're going to like. And I was just
That's funny.
I think I'll be okay.
Paddington's not a little more your speed.
Right? Wow. Yeah. I was like, do you know who you're talking to? Right. I got this.
Have you seen my YouTube channel? Lee, so we talked a bit about all the different horror movies that are exciting us right now, but is there like a certain type of horror movie that you get the most excited about? Is it this sort of more like metaphor-laden horror films that sort of are in the mold of like a Get Out? Jordan Peele's a filmmaker I definitely should have mentioned earlier. Is it the more like comedic leaning stuff like your Abigail's, or is it the studio horror movies, or is it those like nasty little VOD films that seem to emerge from nothing and then leave a lasting impression on you?
I think, for lack of a better word, I know we use that word elevated horror, but
Bro, I was about to ask you about that, so please go in, because that was going to be my question.
Well, I'll mention elevated horror in a sec, but I'll say, Neon and A24, they keep me coming back. As soon as I see a horror movie under those two studios, I'm already interested. And when Longlegs, that's one that's I've anticipated for most of the year. And then when I saw it, when I walked out of the theater, I was like, this is going to be divisive. But most of those, A24, Neon, and you could pick a couple other studios, they tend to have divisive audiences anyway. I already know that some people, elevated horror, it's not going to be for everybody. And in the horror community, I don't know if you know this, but there's people, they do get offended by the word elevated horror, which I don't
get
understand.
Offended.
You would get offended?
Feel like I get furious. my blood boils. I understand the pet peeve of the word, because I feel like it's saying that until these directors came, the rest of horror was trash. And it's like, I feel like
that's a good point.
Right, it looks down at slashers like they can't have something that approaches that or the like. But like you were mentioning, there are directors who love horror and are here for it. And then there may be directors who come in because their last film wasn't good, so they try to dip into horror before leaving it. They're like Miley Cyrus twerking before she says, I don't want to twerk no more. And they use the genre. And I feel like the elevated horror element of it is this idea that this is appropriate horror. I'm not watching a crappy genre. This is the good ones from the genre.
Yeah, I'm not some gory slasher. I'm smarter than that.
I felt like that's the take that a lot of elevated horror kind of approached.
That's
This
the
is
unspoken part.
Yeah, this is the good MCU movie, not the bad MCU movie, and it makes I feel like it almost puts a blanket over a lot of the genre.
This is the Sony Marvel movie,
Exactly,
not the
right.
MCU movie.
Yeah, it's in association with.
Yeah. I wonder what like Joe and Jane Sixpack think of or do they even know the term elevated horror? You know?
Nah, it's marketing.
It's an interesting debate to have because I look at it as a category, and I never looked at it as an offensive word. And maybe that's because I love it all. You know, to me, a good horror movie is a good horror movie. But I guess I could see how some people, they might feel like somebody's trampling on the lower fare type stuff.
Yeah,
I
totally.
never looked at it like that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like elevated horror is like a useful term to sort of distinguish what a certain type of horror movie, while the term itself might not be like the most appropriate given the
Right?
things
This
that
is
Art said
elevated.
about it. But
This
there
is-
certainly is like a type of movie that is the elevated horror movie. And a lot of those, as you mentioned, are the ones that we get from A24 or Neon. And they're these more prestige feeling films that maybe have a quieter pace to them, but still are horror movies, even if they're not like wall-to-wall blood or gore or anything like that. I agree with you, Lee, in that those are probably the ones that generally I find the most interesting. I like the whole, like, it's a metaphor for trauma or whatever if it's well told enough. But you know, the thing is, like, there is just so much stuff emerging from so many places, and I found myself really getting the most excited by these very like artsy indie horror takes and your stuff, your Skinamarink, or this year I really liked In a Violent Nature, and I know that those films might test the patience of maybe your average horror fan, but I just find them to be like really bold in their rejection of what came before it in some ways. They're charting their own path too.
I think it's a generational thing because I think if you didn't have studios, these newer studios like A24 and Neon, I think the generation, the movement itself created the word, you know, and I think younger audiences that like not just horror because A24, they don't do just horror, they just do thought-provoking films. And I think movie fans in general like some of us, we like thought-provoking films. You guys love thought-provoking films. And I think you guys, you have a wide palette of taste in terms of movies. You like horror, you like, drama, you like even comedies, even superhero type stuff. Sometimes. And to me, if I see a director that has a distinct vision, you could tell that he's very motivated and he wants to put out the best product that he can. It doesn't matter the genre. And I think we're in a new age. I really think we're in a new age with these studios that have they have little factions of fans. A24, they have their horror fans, but they also have their non-horror fans. And I think it all kind of meshes together, and maybe that's what created the word. I don't know. I've always been interested in how the word was created. Where did it come from? First time I heard it was like Scream 5, but I think when they said it in Scream 5, I thought it was, I chuckled at it because she was talking about A24 and Hereditary and all that. And I was like, I get that. I completely, it fits. But what Art was saying does hold some true, because when you start putting a scale on it, like this type of horror movie is far better than the scum, the dirty type horror movies. But so in that sense, you're right, Art. But I think it's a generational thing. I don't think that word would have existed if not for these newer studios, newer filmmakers.
Would you not say The Shining is elevated horror?
I would. I actually
Rosemary's
would say
Baby?
The Shining's elevated horror.
The Omen? I feel like you're saying, it's the people who use it don't mean it in a bad way, and that's, I mean, we know we live in America 2024. Yeah. That's where it gets twisted, where people are using a word that people may find offensive because they think you're judging my tastes, when in reality it's the new subgenre of horror. Can it be thought-provoking, or is it exhilarating because it's like you're just out in the woods, who can survive? Right. It's not survival horror. Yeah. It's metaphorical horror, like Zach was saying. I remember it during the Babadook. That's like when it really started rising up. That led to what you're mentioning. Right. That intro of Scream 5, where they mention it as being elevated horror. And I think where it ends up becoming a thing is that when you put labels on things, those labels end up inverting themselves, because now those movies were just good movies that were horrors. A label was put on them. So now you have filmmakers 10 years in the game with that genre in their head making elevated horror, and that's where it comes off a little weird. Now that they're kind of self-aware of the word, it's not as good as the movies that actually cause that term to be out there, in my opinion.
Totally.
Yeah, that's a good point. I kind of look at it too as like if you look in the music world, especially like say rock and metal. I mean, metal alone has, let's just go ahead and say 25, 30 different subgenres of metal, and those guys fight amongst each other constantly. So when you compare that world to like the movie world and then go even deeper to like the horror world, if the only thing we're fighting about is one word, elevated, then it's not so bad, because again, in the like the rock world, the metal world, everybody gets offended by everything. It's kind of silly, and it's ironic because of how tough they seem.
Right.
But yeah, you don't. For the most part, in horror, it seems like the community itself is very loving and they inviting of each other. And even when I do see little debates about elevated horror, it usually ends with kind of a chuckle or laugh. It's not like I'm not really offended by it, but it is interesting to discuss because of this day and age. Again, I think it's just a word that's this day and age, and I have a blast talking about it with you guys. It's fun.
Art, do you want to identify some of those subgenres you've been keeping track of from 2024?
Number one, I think devil movies are all on the rise here. We'll be talking a little bit about Longlegs.
Dude, I was literally thinking the same thing. Sorry to cut you off, but go. Yeah, I was literally going to say that.
Satan has got the best PR team this year. Late Night with the Devil, Longlegs, The First Omen, Immaculate.
Yep.
I just watched last night The Devil's Bath, the newest one. It's on Shudder. With Franz and I'm looking on two directors who did Goodnight Mommy. They're back. They're back on their BS and on their devil stuff. Hollywood, I think just filmmaking in general has also become a little subgenre in horror with Stop Motion, one of my favorite horror movies of this past year, about the daughter of a stop motion director, now continuing that on. So it's a film about filmmaking. Maxine, she goes to Hollywood. The Exorcism, not a great movie. Not a great movie. I think, Lee, you also felt the exact... But again, was not doing the same thing. The son of the actor from The Exorcist taking a little bit of a jab at what would it be like if I was directing an actor who got all of this stuff put on them when they're like remaking the original Exorcist, but it's called Georgetown, whatever. Either way, another horror about horrors.
And you mentioned Late Night with the Devil among the devil movies, but that goes in the Hollywood basket as well.
Goes there too. Well, let me throw you Longlegs, the son of Anthony Perkins, talking about yet again his relationship with his father in that way.
We'll get to that.
And then we got the upcoming Smile 2. I think that's another one that's going to kind of deal with two things we've talked about. A new original horror movie, now being a franchise, and then her being a pop star. So it's going to kind of be in that world of fame and such. Yeah. We also have survival horror creature features. I kind of combined that one together. We had mentioned A Quiet Place. I think that's very reliant on the creatures. Out of Darkness was a throwback period. Like, I think they were like cavemen or something trying to survive from this ancient beast out there. Sting. If you don't like spiders, do not watch Sting. But that was another... pretty decent independent film that was out. Arcadian with Nick Cage also had a creature feature there. We're in Shark Week. I had my shark shirt, but it got dirty. Under Paris. No Way Up. I think Under Paris was shouted out by Stephen King also. So it's like there are a lot of these subgenres of horror and thriller that are getting combined with each other.
It's hard to keep up with it all.
Yeah, Alien Romulus right around the corner would be my biggest. That's looks like it's going back, not to the heady stuff that Prometheus was going into, but just like, are they going to survive this environment? We have the artsy stuff. Look, some of them may not be the best. Handling the Undead was a Sundance International film that was interesting because the dead came back to life. But it's nice to see that there's different flavors out there. I didn't think Night Swim was the worst. I think people really hate it. I think that was an artsy movie, really marketed as a horror film.
I didn't hate it either.
I didn't. There was something there. I saw what the director was going for.
I think there was potential.
There was potential there, but the trailers promised maybe something a little different. Red Rooms, just caught that last night as well. Messed up. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but it's about a court case where this guy has filmed the most horrendous things that he did to a bunch of girls. And there's someone who's in there watching the court case who has those tapes and is bidding for them online.
Wow.
You seek it out on your own accord. We're just talking about the different spectrums of horror here.
Yeah.
That is a horrific film. In a violent nature, like Zach had mentioned, taking what we know as a slasher genre, but flipping it on its head to get the POV in the most artsiest way possible from the serial killer. My favorite, to top this list, I Saw the TV Glow. Just the different shades of horror that you can get where it stops becoming an external thing and an internal thing. It's just beautiful. We got a couple coming out this year for artsy horror. The Substance, playing on that. That's going to be coming from
Very
Mubi.
excited for that one.
Man, I can't wait
Presence.
for The Substance.
Presence from Sundance is one of the most interesting
Ooh.
tales, is all I can say, coming from Steven Soderbergh and the way he
Yeah.
shot that movie. And then Zach really liked this film called Dead Mail that came out of South by. I'll let him
Yes.
speak a little bit to that, because isn't that another interesting take? That feels like a found footage, like actual movie that they got from a mill.
Yeah, like it's not literally found footage, but the way that it sort of like pieces the story together, it does have that feeling of like, did a detective like assemble the files, and this is how we're seeing it. It's just got this real sense of like unease and discomfort throughout. That's one that has a great mastery of tone, even though that one maybe leans a little bit more towards like crime thriller. Like it's undeniably got that horror element to it too. A lot of really great movies so far from 2024. We're going to talk about A Quiet Place Day 1, Maxine, and Longlegs in just a second. And I know you really loved Longlegs, Lee, but what are some of the 2024 horror movies that have stood out to you the most?
First Omen was my favorite horror movie until I saw Longlegs. And to me, I was kind of in shock because The Omen, it's a franchise with quite a few movies, and the first one is a classic. I saw the second one. I thought it was okay. I didn't even bother with the third and the fourth. I've heard different I've actually heard the third's pretty decent. But this was the movie of the year. You know, we all have that movie where you're like, I don't think this is going to be that great. But then I saw the trailer for it when it popped up. I was like, whoa, that was a really effective trailer. You know, it looked like they have some interesting ideas behind it. And then when I saw the movie, I was like, there was one scene at the like near the final act of the movie where the main actress, she gets out of this car.
The possession scene?
I love just a good, yeah, man. It's just a good like physical performance, you know.
Yeah.
And man, she just put everything into that performance, and I was like, wow, that might be one of the best performances I've seen this year in terms of horror. So yeah, First Omen was phenomenal. Late Night with the Devil, I loved it just because of the novelty of it. It literally felt like, you know, because I grew up teenager in the 80s, but I remember like the Johnny Carson show and seeing these late night TV show hosts come out. I mean, they still do it and they do the monologue and everything. That's what it felt like. Like, what if you had a late night show where they're literally bringing on somebody that's conjuring the devil, you know, and what would that be like? And I think Stopmotion, he did a fine job with that, you know, just thinking outside the box. You know, that's one thing I love about horror. You always get these ideas. And you were talking earlier, Zach, about, you know, like reaching back to like movies like Blair Witch Project. I wonder if we'll ever have another movie like that where the audience literally thinks it's real. Because that happens maybe, you know, once every 30 years, something like that. You know, is this real? And then you see the audience, they're in the theater and they're thinking it's real. I thought it was real when I saw Blair Witch in the, you know?
Right.
And that's exciting. That's really exciting. Even if the movie turns out to be not that great, just the idea of, wow, I feel this community, we're all sitting down, we're going to watch this snuff footage that was found in the woods. You know, it's quite insane. I know I went off a tangent there, but
no, totally.
Yeah, Longlegs is definitely my favorite of the year for sure. And Immaculate, I got to mention Immaculate too. That ending of Immaculate, that was the one where, like, okay, in the middle of the movie, you find out where they're going with this thing. And then once you okay, I'm on board. I want to see what's gonna. I'm not gonna spoil it, but I'm gonna see what's gonna happen. Like, I'm dying to know how she's gonna deal with this situation that she's in. And then at the very end of the movie, I was just like, wow, they went there. They did it. I just love when movies do that. They don't really. Is this gonna like offend somebody? No, this is our story. We're gonna tell it, and we're gonna leave it to, you know, let the audience do with it what they will. And funny enough, I didn't see as much of a strong reaction from the audience with Immaculate as I thought I would, but I just love movies that push buttons, you know, that get a conversation going, and that's what I loved about Immaculate. So I think those are my favorites of the year horror-wise. Love Lies Bleeding is more leaning into like the thriller type realm, but man, that was a phenomenal film.
She also
and
did,
just different too.
What's her last one? the Catholic one.
Saint Maud.
So she's kind of like in that realm
she
too.
did. Yeah, Rose Glass. Yeah,
The
Saint
multiple
Maud's great,
genres.
too, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Love
very
Lies to
good.
Be Bleeding definitely has at least a toe, if not a whole foot, in the horror genre. But yeah, a bunch of really excellent films. I do want to give us a chance to talk about some of the recent horror movies that have had a lot of buzz. And let's start with A Quiet Place Day One, the prequel to A Quiet Place, and the first film in the franchise that was not directed by John Krasinski. The honors this time go to Michael Sarnowski, whose last film, Pig, was with Nicolas Cage and was a bit of an indie critical darling. But this is a much bigger movie, even in Quiet Place terms, and it has New York City coming under attack from the Quiet Place monsters, and suddenly the city that never sleeps falls silent. Art, this, as I mentioned, was one of the highest grossing movies of the year. It is a big time blockbuster. How do you feel the Quiet Place franchise has navigated this shift into, big time blockbuster status while still trying to retain its roots in horror?
It's pretty smart. I think one big thing that they did with the marketing was kind of push that they were going to explain a lot more, but it's clear that they're going to give you like a little bit and a little bit and a little bit so that it can, obviously be here around for a while. So the only other option that you have is making these independent stories. And it truly does feel like what the comic book movie said they're going to do. Can they take an indie drama script and then superhero it? Can you IP it? And what's fascinating about A Quiet Place is that it was already there in the studio. Paramount owns Cloverfield. And that is exactly what they said they were doing with Cloverfield. Finding these projects that may have not done well on their own. And they made Paradox. They made the best one, which was 10 Cloverfield Lane. And I think that's what this feels the most like. A story that has really nothing to do with the world. It just so happens to take place in it. And they got great actors involved. That's all you really needed. I am fine with that. So I think it was very effective in that sense that as long as you're getting a director and not doing the like Jurassic Park treatment with them or the Marvel treatment where everything you liked about their indie film is now gone in the big blockbuster, then you have something that can work. And you can see the push and pull in A Quiet Place when it was the director and when he needed to have like a monster, right? There's moments where they were like reading poetry and I'm like, whoa, this is like an independent drama. And then a jump scare happens with a nightmare scene, right? Because you can see the push and pull from the studio. But it's still effective and not teetering all the way to the other side where it feels sometimes like... I had the same thing because I agree with you, Lee. I like the Omen movie, the first Omen, because it feels like its own standalone thing. And the only parts that really rubbed me the wrong way was when they needed to attach it again to the franchise. But it shows you that they've got the power to make like a really good story where you're following a character, and that's the reason you go to the movies. So that was very effective.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm learning that the Quiet Place franchise, I think they work best when they do make it more like small scale and personal. Yeah. And I think a lot of people wanted Day One to be bigger, but I was happy that they didn't go that route. And you got a little bit of that in the beginning, showing when the aliens come down and everything. But as soon as that happens, we just follow Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn for the rest of the movie. And I love when they let's focus on strong performances and real human moments. And I think that's when horror works the best, is when you really get down to the nitty gritty of the character and you really get to know them and have moments like the two of them, they're waiting to scream. They're in the dark, like you said, they're reading the poetry, and then as soon as they hear the lightning and the thunder, they scream. And those are the moments that I love in horror. It's not really 100 creatures running across the top of a building. Yeah, that's cool, but I like the personal approach. And so I think they went the route that I wanted them to go with this movie. I thought it was really, really effective. Maybe it might be my second favorite in the franchise after the first movie. But yeah, that's when they work the best, I think. I'm in no hurry to see just a full, big budget, bigger scale, the military fighting the aliens Quiet Place movie. I'm sure it could be good with the right director, but I like these little smaller character-driven stories.
Because this franchise is ultimately about like what happens to us when we lose our ability to communicate and lose our ability to sort of live lives in the way that we had. And I think those are the moments that really shine. Like I love this one small moment early in the movie when Lupita, her character, is walking like against the flow of foot traffic that's going towards the docks, and she's sort of looking around at the different people and noticing the little sounds, right? And she looks at this guy in a wheelchair and focuses on like the squeaky wheel in the wheelchair, and it's this thing where it's like, as a viewer, you then have to think, oh man, how awful and horrible would it be to have to navigate a situation like this from a noisy wheelchair? Like you wouldn't be able to, and that's what I love in movies like this. And when you sort of either put yourself in the situation or think outside yourself, and you get these like revealing details about these people. And that's something that I think Michael Sarnowski really excels at in adding these little moments. Like the running bit with the wanting a slice of pizza is so relatable and so human. And even the little like performance that they do together at some point in the film.
It's literal, but it's a metaphor as well. You know?
Exactly. It's these moments of whimsy in a franchise that often doesn't have, like, it's looking for those moments of whimsy to escape, because otherwise it feels so bleak and oppressive and dark. But I thought this movie handled it really, really well. I was curious how they were going to navigate going from the intimacy of, like the family unit to a big cityscape for a franchise like this. But yeah, like you're saying, Lee, I think ultimately what works so well about it is because they don't focus on the millions of people. They focus on just a few and their experience living through it. So I really enjoyed Quiet Place Day One. I haven't seen the first one since I believe I saw it in theaters, but to me it rivals the first one for quality.
Yeah, definitely. I watched the first one, I think right before I went and saw Day One, because it had been quite a while. And I forgot how strong that movie was as far as just focusing on that family. And John Krasinski, man, his performance at the end, just a tearjerker. But I think when you focus and hone in on those characters and just lock in on them, and their weaknesses and their struggles, that without spoiling it, the very end of the movie of Day One, that's the payoff. Mm-hmm. You feel what she's feeling at the very end of that movie, and it just clicks, because of everything that came before.
Definitely. I'm going to skip Maxine to give us a little more time with Longlegs, because I really want to get Lee's takes on this film. It's the hotly anticipated horror film, which has been largely shrouded in mystery thanks to a clever marketing campaign. Few plot details were revealed until the weeks before the film's release, and Nicolas Cage has largely been absent from advertisements in order to help keep the villain Longlegs' appearance under wraps. Osgood Perkins' detective thriller is meant to unsettle. But Lee, there was some debate as to whether or not his film does a good job of scaring audiences. I saw that you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the horror community, and my thing with that was when you say the scariest movie in a decade, and, my own personal experience, I haven't been scared by a movie in 30 years. It takes, but I know when a movie's scary. Yeah. I'm embarrassed to say it.
Say it.
Halloween 4. The ending of Halloween 4 totally screwed me up. I mean, I couldn't sleep for like 2 weeks. Oh my God, no, at the very end of the movie. Yeah, I was 15 though, But
it leaves an impression.
As you get older, you can handle a lot more. But I've had chilling moments, like the very end of the Blair Witch Project when he's in that corner. Yeah, I've had moments that do send a chill down my spine. But at the end of the day, I want it to be creepy. I don't want it to be not horror. Mm-hmm. Don't advertise it as a horror movie and then not be a horror movie at all. I think they achieved that goal. I did think the movie was creepy. It was definitely a hardcore thriller. So, but yeah, and I constantly see this in my comments though. If any movie's advertised as scary, and by the way, if it has any kind of like religious undertones or devil, that's the go-to marketing wise. It's got to be scary, right? Because it deals with the devil. And how many movies about the devil have we seen? And they all kind of stick to the same formula in terms of how they scare you. So, am I going to be shocked when I watch? Yeah. Am I going to be shocked when I watch Longlegs? What are they going to do that's going to be so different, scare-wise, than any other movie in that wheelhouse, right? So I got excited about Osgood Perkins. I got excited about this Nicolas Cage performance that I heard people talking about. I had so much more to get excited about, than just being scared. Yeah, of course I'm excited about being creeped out, but I had a lot more other things in my mind that I was really looking forward to in that movie. Just beautifully shot film too, by the way. Yeah. Michael Monroe's performance. I was just locked into the story, and I like that there's some ambiguity to it as well. They don't spell out everything, and you can have discussions about what you thought any particular scene might have meant. I've already seen quite a few of them when watching YouTube, but yeah, and I love movies that do that. I don't like movies that spell every single little thing out for you. I like when you'll have one guy in the back say, "I hated it. It was trash," because he didn't really understand where they were going with it. Or one guy might say it was boring and he didn't like it. I wasn't bored 1 second in that movie, So there's a lot to play with discussion-wise with Longlegs, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many brands of horror movies, and we were trying to outline some of it earlier, but like this is not a movie that's trying to be a Terrifier sequel or even like Talk to Me or something like that. The movies that came to mind for me were a lot of the films of David Fincher, whether that's like Seven or Zodiac, and these like crime detective thrillers that have these like really horrific elements at their center, but like they're more about like the investigation and the tone that they set throughout too. So while Longlegs isn't exactly like a movie full of jump scares or like gratuitous violence or anything like that, what it really excels at is just imbuing this ominous tone, this sense of foreboding and dread, and this just feeling that there is something horribly wrong at the center of this thing. And he does that through the excellent production design and the style of the movie, the look of the movie, even the performances. Everything feels like very flat in a way where you just are waiting for something to jolt you. And it's really, I don't know, it just, there's something very devilish about it, not to be too punny.
It's shot by, if I'm not mistaken, the guy who did In a Violent Nature.
Oh, that's not too surprising.
And guess what he told him? He said, "I don't want to homage horror movies. I like Gus Van Sant." Sound familiar? So they got the cinematographer, just doing Gus Van Sant movies in order to make it as different as possible. So I think that's the other aspect of it, of like why it comes off so creepy.
How do you feel the movie lived up or maybe didn't live up to the marketing or the tone that the marketing set maybe?
Yeah. It's funny, you were talking about marketing and you mentioned Seven, and I just had this thought in my head. If Seven came out today, because marketing was different back then in the 90s, I think they market movies differently today than they did in the 90s. So if Seven came out today, would they say, scariest movie in a decade? Right. Because it does have some really creepy stuff in Seven.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some of the 7 deadly sins that they're having to do in the movie are downright terrifying, So I don't know if you want to blame the marketing or you just blame yourself or what it is that gets people so tapped into that the only reason they want to go to a movie is to be scared, when you have freaking amazing cinematographers, amazing directors, just running the gamut and just thought-provoking, subject matter. Mm-hmm. And I just love that stuff about Longlegs. And his one of his other films, Blackcoat's Daughter, has a very similar tone.
It's the best one.
You were talking about Longlegs and just how you felt when you were watching the movie. I felt uncomfortable the entire movie. And I think, I would rather feel uncomfortable for 2 hours than get one big jump scare that makes me, put the covers over my face,
Yeah.
I like that just constant. That's a talented director to me that can make me feel like something's going to happen any moment. I just don't know when it's going to happen. And I was kind of scared comparing this movie to Skinamarink. I didn't like Skinamarink, but it's trash, I loved the idea. Yeah. Trash, bro. No, but I loved the idea of Skinamarink, and if I sat in Skinamarink for 5 minutes, I loved what they were driving at, and I definitely didn't feel comfortable throughout the entire movie. So in that sense, I think they achieved that goal. And if you combine the two, if you took Skinamarink and, give it a plot like Longlegs, because Longlegs is another movie that makes you feel very uncomfortable. So I think I made this comparison that like Longlegs is what I wanted Skinamarink to be, you know, but they're two completely different movies. And I appreciate what the director was going for with Skinamarink, you know, but after an hour and 40 minutes, I wanted to saw my own head off. So, yeah.
I can see with the marketing of what you were saying, I never think it's I don't think it's ever been, but especially today, to say you are the scariest movie. You are asking people. It's a dare. You're betting them, hey, this isn't...
It is.
Right? You live in a world where people are going to want to just have an opposite opinion of it, so don't overhype it. And I think that is a big issue that comes with marketing. I think it was still effective. I feel like Neon took a page out of A24, who has done this how many times? From It Comes at Night to even some of the most recent stuff, and overhyping what the premise of a movie is going to be. Even Hereditary, a movie that I adore.
Yeah.
They do that a lot, and I feel like Neon knew how to take that for this movie to have this almost like pressure point where the moment it came out, people were so intrigued to see what is it. And then you get your differing opinions, but I mean, you look back at The Shining, that got dissed. That was divisive. I'm like you, Lee. I don't care when a movie is divisive because it shows me that the director did something and people can be split on it. Now, maybe, I
love it.
They're wrong. Maybe they didn't do something correct, but at least they took a swing for something. And I'd rather the gamble be like maybe people didn't understand it, or at least maybe he took a leap that people don't agree with, than for it to be this consensus for a boring movie or, you know, the worst of the worst and everyone just knows to skip it. I like when there's a balance there because I have some issues with the story in Longlegs and how it plays out, but the more that I read into Osgood Perkins, I see the basis of it. Without spoiling too much of it, you see what the main story is for our main character and what she's dealing with beyond the scope of this, you know, serial killer that she's on the hunt for. I gotta ask both of y'all. While it's a secret that Nick Cage is in the movie and what he's doing in there, man, you don't see a little bit of Nick Cage kind of behind all that makeup? To me, the most interesting part of this movie is that I saw it as a comedy every other scene. With Nick Cage. Yeah. And then I hear him talk about it, and Osgood said, if you're laughing, that's fine with me, because that's the most uncomfortable thing. He's best buds with Jordan Peele. He's in Nope playing a director, Osgood Perkins. So he knows that balance, creepiness, is sometimes not really a boo, but something so weird that you're going, ha, ha, ha. It's a laugh and a scare at the same time. And I felt my audience split between them going, I'm seeing a horror movie, and then Nick Cage doing a SNL bit, and then the other people going, I don't even see Nick Cage. I see the most horrendous Buffalo Bill looking thing in front of me. And then to hear Nick Cage say, yeah, I based it off my mom, it just makes your head go all over the place. And it just makes it unsettling for a reason.
Yeah. When I heard that Nicolas Cage was in this, that actually, it lowered my excitement level just a bit. Just because it's Nicolas Cage and he's the wild man. He'll do anything. And I felt like Nicolas Cage had to prove himself to me. Like, am I going to buy him as this really, you know, scary dude?
Yeah.
And it all came down to his performance is phenomenal, but also how Osgood Perkins handled him, handled the shots, handled how he put him in the frame. And to me, it was like a composition. And the very first scene in the movie when Nicolas Cage shows up, for me, that wasn't Nicolas Cage. I was immediately all my suspicions were gone, and I was locked into. I think his name was Cobbler. I've heard some people say Cobble and some people say Cobbler. I called him Cobbler, but I was locked into that character, Longlegs, for the rest of the movie. I didn't see Nicolas Cage, and I think that's the goal that you want. But like you said, Art, I saw so many people. They hinged the entire movie on that performance, and it can come across as funny, like the scene in the car when that's Nicolas Cage. If you take that scene away from the movie, make a YouTube video out of it, that's Nicolas Cage. But if you put it in the context of the movie, I was freaked out by it for some reason. It was just the sound design and everything and the story that was going on at the time, and I was just like, that's a scary dude, you know? Because I was under that character.
When he says that bit in the interrogation, and his voice gets really deep. He's playing with his voice a lot. But he does this one bit about the mom.
I loved it.
When you need to get dirtier to get cleaner, you need to get dirtier to get...
Yeah.
I agree with you at the beginning, I thought it was a little goofy some of the moments he came up, but when he got into that and his hair's all over and like like he's at the bottom of the framing, I'm like, oh no, he's possessed. I love Nick Cage. He's possessed. I don't know how else to say it.
I got a little bit of that Heath Ledger.
Yes. Oh, for sure.
When he goes, "You are the dark," and I was like, "Oh my God, that's the Heath Ledger Joker." I could see him saying that.
Also, not just to give praise to him, but in the context of the movie, there's also Kiernan Shipka, who was in Black Coat's daughter. Incredible performance in Black Coat's daughter as well. Oh my God. She was a standout for me in this. The one scene and the lines they give her. Me too. And you have some questions of it when you come out. I've seen a lot of people be a little confused by it. But once you get the answers to that, after the spoilers, and you realize why she speaks the way she speaks.
Dude, I'm a Kiernan Shipka fan. As soon as she popped up, I was like, oh boy, here we go. Take it away. She's a really great actress. And I was wondering, that character is the most interesting character in the movie for me. Because of how little you get and how many questions you have after that performance is over, that scene is over. I could give me that movie. I would love a prequel about that character and what she went through.
You hear that speech the second time around, way scarier.
I can't wait to see it again. And I want to see it in the theater again.
You could say it has long legs.
Yeah. I wasn't sure why she was doing what felt like Foghorn Leghorn playing Gollum, but it made me lean in for sure. Yeah. In regards to Cage, though, I think it's a bit like that thing of seeing somebody acting strange in public, where part of you does kind of want to laugh at the bigness of it, at the way that he feels so out of place with everything around him, especially because this is such a quiet, reserved, flat movie, and then he comes in and it's screaming and dancing and doing silly voices. But the same way that you see a stranger in public and they could turn and focus their attention on you, and that is a little... I think there's some of that quality to his performance. It is a hilarious performance in some respects, but he's also just fully embodying that deranged nature of the Longlegs character. And there's fewer actors on this planet that are better at fully embodying somebody than Nick Cage is.
I would have been the girl at the gas station.
He's a brand.
I would have been like, "Daddy, come get him." And it is Dale Ferdinand Cobble.
There we go.
Because I saw it twice, so I know I had it in my notes. But that's the name he goes by. And also, a fun fact, because I had just mentioned the girl at the gas station. That's Oz Perkins' daughter. So you see a lot of little flourishes of his behind the scenes and such. And it's just fascinating to read up on the Perkins family and see how he kind of unleashes it in his movies. As long as you have that core, I think that's usually when people are going to connect with you. Even if you got people who disagree, you have some truth in there, and it will resonate with people for sure.
I love movies that you want to research the movie directly after you see it. Because most movies you see, you're done with it, and then you move on to the next thing. But
you got everything you need.
Movies like Longlegs, just because there's so much going on, and the killer is so interesting, and just the way the murders happen is so interesting. I immediately wanted to know more, and I immediately started looking up articles about the movie, and I love when movies do that.
Yeah,
definitely. Lee, I know you got a jet soon. Is there any last things you want to add about Longlegs, about horror in 2024? What's on your mind?
Well, I'm just curious to see, are there any other surprises, because throughout the year, at the beginning of the year, you're always expecting certain movies. But I love those surprises that come along, say in a February or a March that, I didn't even know anything about this movie. And then it ends up being like lowlifes, So I'm hoping that maybe there's a few more surprises like that throughout the year that kind of stirs up the community a little bit. And oh man, have you seen this movie, And I'm Oddity was really good. I'm hoping that maybe you can get a little bit of word of mouth going for that. And plus, I always root for, more of an independent type film. You could tell that the budget for that movie was pretty low, but it was still very effective, And I love when you have stories like that can be made for a fraction of the budget that, I'll even say Longlegs, I was shocked that the movie was filmed for between $3 and $10 million. It looks like a freaking movie. $20-30 million movie. So that's really the only thing I wanted to say is I'm just looking forward to the surprises. I think that's what gets me excited.
Definitely.
Get them out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited for when It's What's Inside gets unleashed on the public. We had a chance to see that back at Sundance, and then we rewatched it at South by Southwest, and Netflix picked it up, but hopefully that one resonates, because it is a wild good time.
But that's why I pay attention to you guys. I watch your podcast, and because I know that you guys are going to throw some movies at me that I wasn't even on my radar, and I love when you guys do that. So like you just did there. One. What's that movie called again? You said, Zach?
It's What's Inside. You're gonna love it. We'll bring you back on maybe when we talk about it. It's
okay. All right. Yeah,
so
we're gonna talk about
it. yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Oh man, Lee, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find more from you?
Yeah, I'm on the YouTubes. Just type in Drum Dums and you'll find me there. Yeah. That's definitely. And all my socials are at Drum Dums. That's the nice thing about having a name like Drum Dums and nobody else has. You can get every at on every social media platform, and you're good. So, yeah,
perfect.
And,
yeah,
us three, we've known each other for I think 9 years now, which is insane to me.
Yeah.
So I
time flies on the internet.
You two grow and.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, it's been awesome. It's been so cool to see.
I'm looking forward to the next time.
Too, and we love keeping up with your channel. You're one of our go-tos when it comes to breaking down the latest in horror. We like to talk about horror, but I always like to see somebody who's like fully immersed in it in the way that you are. How you react to the latest sensations and whether or not they're up to snuff for you. So just always appreciate that you can join us here.
Which is why it's up to you. Afraid. Is it going to be good or not? The new AI Afraid movie. It's all on you, Lee. Over, under.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? I'll give every movie a chance. We'll see. But
there we go.
I'm not. I'm not
the movie critic answer right there.
I'm not betting on that.
It could be bad.
We got a lot, dude. Traps right around the corner. New M. Night. The Front Room. Heretic.
Yeah, Trap looks good.
Speak No Evil.
Heretic looks great.
Oh, Nosferatu.
Like, yeah, it's so much. Do we count Beetlejuice?
A lot coming, man. A lot coming.
Beetlejuice, like, it's a lot. Yeah, I'm excited.
It's going to be an exciting year for horror fans. But that's about all for this installment of Intercut. Catch more from me at Zshevich or at Multiplex Show for my videos. That's Art. He's at LME Movies, and this is Intercut. You can find us across social media at Intercut Pod. That's Intercut Pod. And make sure you're subscribed either to the video podcast here on youtube.com/intercutpod or on the audio podcast available on most podcatchers. You can find new episodes of our Intercut Weekend Must Watch streaming weekly on the YouTube channel. And be sure to leave us a comment, like the video, consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify to give us that much requested 5-star review. It does a lot to help the channel. Like our Facebook or Instagram or Twitter pages. You can support us on Patreon. You can support us right here on YouTube. Click that join button, and all of them are available at Intercut Pod. You'll get updates there throughout the week from Art, from me, from Lee, from all the guests that we feature here on Intercut. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.